Robert Spencer sits behind the wheel of his $200 million empire, cruising through downtown Manhattan in a Bentley that costs more than most people's homes. He's untouchable, unstoppable, the kind of success story that makes other men jealous and women take notice. But 15 years ago, Robert Spencer was nobody. A broken man with empty pockets and a shattered heart, destroyed by the one person he trusted most in the world. His wife didn't just leave him. She obliterated him, stole his dreams, his designs, his entire future, and walked away with millions while he was left with nothing but debt and humiliation. Today, as Robert's Bentley stops at a red light, he sees something that makes his blood run cold. A homeless woman sitting on the corner, holding a cardboard sign, begging for change from strangers who won't even look at her. The woman looks up, and Robert's world stops. It's her. The woman who destroyed his life is now living the nightmare he once lived. Karma has come full circle, and she's about to discover that the broken man she left behind has become everything she threw away. What Robert does next will shock you. Because when you have the power to crush someone who destroyed you, the ultimate revenge might not be what you think it is. Sometimes, the most devastating thing you can do to an enemy is something nobody sees coming. The black Bentley Continental purred through downtown Manhattan like a predator stalking its prey. Behind the wheel, Robert Spencer adjusted his platinum Rolex and glanced at the city skyline through tinted windows. 42 years old, sharp jawline, silver-streaked hair perfectly styled. Everything about him screamed success. The kind of success that comes from clawing your way up from absolute nothing. His phone buzzed with another notification. Another million-dollar deal closed. Another property acquired. Another victory in a life built on the ashes of betrayal. Robert Spencer Construction had become a $200 million empire, and he was the king of a concrete jungle he had built with his own bloodied hands. The traffic light turned red at the intersection of 5th and Broadway. Robert drummed his fingers on the leather steering wheel, his mind already racing toward the next acquisition. The homeless encampment on the corner barely registered in his peripheral vision. Just another blight on the city he was slowly transforming, one skyscraper at a time. But then something made him look. Really look. A woman sat cross-legged on a piece of cardboard, holding a weathered sign that read, "Anything helps." God bless. Her clothes were dirty and torn. Her once blonde hair hung in greasy strands around a face that had seen too much hardship. She was thin, gaunt even, with hollowed cheeks and desperate eyes that scanned every passing car for a glimpse of mercy. Robert's heart stopped. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. The woman looked up, and their gazes met through the tinted glass. For a moment, time collapsed. 15 years vanished in an instant. The successful CEO disappeared, replaced by a 27-year-old struggling architect who had believed in love, in partnership, in building something beautiful with someone who claimed to love him back. Helena Torres, the woman who had destroyed everything he once was. Robert's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. The car behind him honked impatiently as the light turned green, but Robert couldn't move. He couldn't think. He could only stare at the ghost of his past sitting on the corner like a broken doll. Helena didn't recognize him. How could she? The man she had left was thin, desperate, wearing second-hand clothes and driving a rusted Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner. The man staring at her now was unrecognizable. Success had transformed him completely. Cars honked louder. Robert slowly pressed the accelerator, but he couldn't drive away. Not yet. He pulled into a nearby parking garage, his hands shaking as he turned off the engine. The silence was deafening. 15 years ago, Robert Spencer had been nobody. A dreamer with big ideas and empty pockets, scraping together rent money while designing buildings that existed only in his imagination. He had met Helena at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village, where she was working as a server while claiming to be between modeling jobs. She was beautiful, sophisticated, everything he thought he wanted. Helena Torres was 23 then, with platinum blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that could make men forget their own names. She had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world, like your dreams mattered, like she believed in you more than you believed in yourself. Robert had fallen hard and fast. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Helena would show up at his tiny apartment with wine and takeout, listening to his architectural plans with what seemed like genuine fascination. She would trace her fingers over his blueprints and whisper about the empire they would build together. She made him feel like a king, even when he was eating ramen noodles for the third night in a row. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony in Central Park. Robert had used his entire savings to buy her a modest engagement ring, and Helena had cried when he proposed. They were going to conquer the world together, she said. They were going to build something beautiful. For 2 years, it felt like they were actually doing it. Robert worked 16-hour days, taking on every project he could find. Helena supported him, or so it seemed. She would bring him coffee at his drafting table, massage his shoulders when he was stressed, and talk about the house they would buy once his architecture firm took off. Robert had one partner then, a smooth-talking businessman named David Kramer who handled the financial side while Robert focused on design. David was 5 years older, with an expensive suit and a silver tongue that could convince anyone to invest in their vision. He had connections, he claimed. He could make things happen. Helena liked David immediately, maybe too much. The first sign of trouble came when Robert noticed Helena and David talking in hushed tones at company events. When he asked about it, Helena would laugh and say they were just discussing business strategies. David would slap Robert on the back and make jokes about how lucky he was to have such a smart wife. Robert wanted to believe them. He needed to believe them. The second sign came when Helena started asking detailed questions about his designs. Not just casual interest, but specific technical questions about load-bearing structures, foundation requirements, and zoning compliance. She said she wanted to understand his work better, to be a true partner in his success. Robert eagerly shared everything. Every innovative technique, every shortcut he had discovered, every brilliant solution to complex architectural problems. Helena absorbed it all with the hunger of someone who truly cared about his dreams. Or so he thought. The betrayal came on a Tuesday morning in October. Robert arrived at the office to find David and Helena in a heated discussion over architectural plans. His architectural plans. Plans that were supposed to be proprietary, locked away in the company's safe. But there they were, spread across David's desk like a feast for thieves. Robert's world shattered in that moment. Not just because of the theft, but because of the look on Helena's face when she saw him. There was no guilt, no shame, no remorse. Just cold calculation and mild annoyance at being caught. "Robert," David said smoothly, not even bothering to cover the plans. "We need to talk." What followed was a nightmare that lasted 6 months. David and Helena had been having an affair for over a year. They had systematically copied every design, every innovation, every brilliant idea that Robert had poured his heart into. They had been planning to start their own firm, using his work as the foundation. But it got worse. So much worse. Helena filed for divorce the next day. Her lawyer was expensive, ruthless, and very well prepared. She claimed that Robert had been emotionally abusive, that he had forced her to work unpaid for his company, that she deserved compensation for her contributions to his success. The contributions she had stolen. In the divorce proceedings, Helena claimed that many of Robert's designs were actually collaborative efforts, that she had provided crucial input that made them viable. She had recordings of their conversations, carefully edited to make it sound like she was the creative genius behind his work. David testified on her behalf, claiming that Helena had been the real brains behind their most successful projects. He produced emails, documents, and testimonies from carefully coached witnesses who backed up their story. Robert lost everything: the house, the savings, the company, and worst of all, his reputation. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit architecture community that Robert Spencer was a fraud who had stolen credit for his wife's work. No one would hire him. No one would work with him. No one would even return his calls. Helena walked away with half of everything he had built, plus a massive alimony payment that would cripple him financially for years to come. David got the company, the clients, and the designs that would make him millions. Robert was left with nothing but debt and a broken heart. The final humiliation came at the divorce finalization. Helena stood in the courthouse wearing a designer dress that cost more than Robert's rent, her arm linked with David's as they whispered and laughed together. When the judge declared them officially divorced, Helena turned to Robert with a smile that could freeze blood. "You never deserved me," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "You never deserved any of this. You are nothing, Robert Spencer. You will always be nothing." Then she walked out of the courthouse and out of his life, leaving him alone with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mountain of legal debt. That night, Robert sat in his empty apartment, evicted notice already posted on the door, and considered ending it all. He had lost everything that mattered. His wife, his work, his dreams, his future. Helena and David had taken it all and left him with nothing but shame and failure. But something inside him refused to break. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was the stubborn refusal to let them win completely. Robert made a decision that night. He would not just survive. He would thrive. He would build something so magnificent, so successful, so undeniably his own that no one could ever take it away from him again. And someday, somehow, Helena Torres would know exactly what she had thrown away. The journey back from nothing was brutal. Robert took any job he could find. Construction work, manual labor, anything that paid cash and didn't require references. He lived in a studio apartment in the worst part of town, eating one meal a day and saving every penny he could scrape together. But he never stopped learning. He never stopped designing. He never stopped planning. During the day, he swung hammers and mixed concrete. At night, he studied building codes, researched new construction techniques, and slowly began to understand the business side of the industry that had been David's domain. He learned about real estate development, about financing, about the complex web of permits and approvals that turned blueprints into buildings. He learned about politics, about which palms to grease and which officials to befriend. He learned about the dirty side of construction, where corners were cut and safety was sacrificed for profit. Most importantly, he learned about people, about their weaknesses, their desires, their fears, about how to read them, how to manipulate them, how to make them need what he was selling. It took 3 years of grinding poverty before Robert scraped together enough money to bid on his first small project, a tiny office renovation in Queens that no one else wanted. He did the work himself, sleeping in his truck to save on hotel costs, and delivered the project 2 weeks early and under budget. The profit was minimal, but it was his, completely his. From there, Robert began to build his empire one brick at a time. He reinvested every dollar, took calculated risks, and slowly began to earn a reputation for reliability and innovation. He hired skilled workers, treated them well, and built a team of people who were as hungry for success as he was. Within 5 years, Robert Spencer Construction was handling million-dollar projects. Within 10 years, he was one of the most sought-after developers in the city. Within 15 years, he had become the man sitting in a Bentley, wearing a platinum watch, commanding a $200 million empire. But success had come at a cost. Robert had built walls around his heart that were thicker than the concrete foundations of his buildings. He had learned to trust no one completely, to always have a backup plan, to never let anyone close enough to hurt him again. He had become exactly what Helena had accused him of being in those divorce proceedings: cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless when it came to protecting what was his. And now, 15 years later, the woman who had destroyed his life was sitting on a street corner, begging for change from people who wouldn't even look at her. Robert sat in his parked car, staring at the concrete wall of the garage, his mind racing. Helena Torres was homeless. The woman who had called him nothing, who had taken everything and left him with shame and debt, was now the one with nothing. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. But as the initial shock wore off, Robert felt something unexpected stirring in his chest. Not satisfaction, not revenge, but something else entirely. Something that surprised him. Curiosity. How had Helena Torres, who had walked away with millions and a successful man by her side, ended up on the street holding a cardboard sign? What had happened to David Kramer and their stolen empire? What had happened to the woman who had been so confident that she would always land on her feet? Robert started the engine and drove slowly back to the intersection. Helena was still there, still holding her sign, still looking desperately at every passing car. She looked older now, worn down by whatever storms had battered her life since their divorce. But those eyes were still the same. Still the eyes of the woman who had promised to build something beautiful with him, then stolen everything he had created. Robert pulled to the curb and rolled down his window. Helena looked up, and for a moment, recognition flickered across her face. Then confusion. Then disbelief. "Robert," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the city traffic. "Robert Spencer?" He nodded slowly, studying her face. The woman who had haunted his dreams for 15 years was now looking at him like he was a ghost. "Hello, Helena," he said quietly. "It's been a long time." Helena's mouth fell open as she stared at the man behind the wheel of the Bentley. This couldn't be Robert Spencer. The Robert she remembered was thin, desperate, wearing clothes from thrift stores and driving a car that barely started on cold mornings. This man was a stranger wearing Robert's face, transformed by success into something she had never imagined possible. "Robert," she whispered again, as if saying his name might make the apparition disappear. "Is that really you?" Robert stepped out of the car, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the pavement. He was tall now, or maybe he had always been tall and she had just never noticed. His shoulders were broader, his presence commanding in a way that made people instinctively step aside. The broken man she had left behind was gone, replaced by someone who looked like he owned the very street they were standing on. "You look surprised," Robert said, his voice calm and measured. There was no anger in his tone, no bitterness, just a cold professionalism that was somehow more unsettling than rage would have been. Helena struggled to her feet, her legs shaking from more than just the cold. The cardboard sign fell from her hands, fluttering to the ground like a broken wing. She was acutely aware of how she must look to him. Dirty, desperate, defeated. Everything she had once mocked him for being. I can't believe it's you," she stammered, her voice cracking. "You look so different. So successful," Robert finished, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, I suppose I do." Helena's eyes darted to the Bentley, to his expensive suit, to the confidence that radiated from him like heat from a fire. This was not the man she had left. This was someone else entirely. "What are you doing here?" she asked, then immediately regretted the question. What was she doing here? That was the more relevant question, and they both knew it. "I was driving to a meeting," Robert said, checking his watch. "A very important meeting, actually. We're breaking ground on a new development next month. 60-story tower, mixed use, luxury condos starting at $3 million. He paused, letting that information sink in. "But then I saw you, and I had to stop. I had to see if it was really you." Helena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold she was. How hungry, how utterly destroyed she must appear to the man who had once promised to love her forever. "Robert, she started, then stopped. What could she possibly say? How could she explain what had happened? How could she make him understand that the woman who had destroyed his life was now living a nightmare of her own? "You what?" Robert asked, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "You're sorry? You've changed? You've learned from your mistakes." Helena flinched at the accuracy of his words. Those were exactly the things she wanted to say, the desperate pleas that had been forming in her mind since the moment she recognized him. "Yes," she whispered. "All of those things. Robert, I am so sorry for what I did to you. I was young and stupid and selfish, and I made terrible choices that hurt you in ways I never fully understood until—" "Until what?" Robert prompted. "Until I lost everything too." Robert studied her face, searching for signs of deception, manipulation, the calculated charm that had once made him believe she loved him. But all he saw was exhaustion, desperation, and something that looked like genuine remorse. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly. "I want to know how Helena Torres, who walked away with everything, ended up on the street with nothing." Helena's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she looked like the young woman he had once loved. Vulnerable, broken, human. "David," she said simply, and in that one word, Robert heard 15 years of pain and regret. "David Kramer," Robert said, not a question but a statement. "Your business partner. Your lover. The man you chose over me. The man who destroyed me just like I destroyed you." Helena replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert felt a cold satisfaction at her admission, but he kept his expression neutral. "I'm listening." Helena looked around, suddenly aware that they were having this conversation on a busy street corner where anyone could hear. But there was nowhere else to go, nowhere else to hide from the truth she had been running from for so long. "It started well," she began, her voice growing stronger as she found her footing in the story. "David and we took your designs, and we built something with them. A company, a reputation, a life. For the first few years, it was everything I thought I wanted. We were successful, wealthy, respected. We had a beautiful apartment, expensive cars, all the things I thought mattered. But, Robert prompted. But David was not the man I thought he was. He wasn't the man you were. He was greedy, reckless, and ultimately stupid. He started cutting corners on projects, using substandard materials, bribing inspectors to overlook code violations. He was making more money in the short term, but he was building a house of cards that was destined to collapse. Helena paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I tried to warn him. I told him he was being too aggressive, too careless. But he wouldn't listen. He said I was being paranoid, that I didn't understand business the way he did. And then, Robert asked, though he suspected he already knew how this story ended. Then one of his buildings collapsed, Helena said quietly. A residential complex in Brooklyn. 43 families were living there. 3 people died, including a 6-year-old girl. Robert felt his stomach tighten. He had heard about that collapse, had read about it in the newspapers. The investigation had revealed massive corruption, shoddy construction, and criminal negligence. But he had never connected it to David Kramer. The investigation was swift and thorough, Helena continued. They found everything. The bribes, the substandard materials, the forged inspection reports. David had been running a criminal enterprise disguised as a construction company. And you were involved? I was his partner. I was listed as a co-owner of the company. I had signed documents, approved budgets, attended meetings. In the eyes of the law, I was just as responsible as he was. Robert began to understand. But you didn't know about the corruption. That's what I told them. That's what I told everyone. But who was going to believe me? I was the woman who had betrayed her husband, stolen his designs, and profited from his work. I had no credibility, no character witnesses, no one who would vouch for my integrity. Helena's voice broke as she continued. David had been keeping 2 sets of books. He had been skimming money from the company, hiding profits in offshore accounts, preparing for the day when everything would collapse. When the investigation started, he disappeared, left the country with millions of dollars, and left me to face the consequences alone. So you went to prison? 8 years, Helena confirmed. 8 years in a federal penitentiary for conspiracy, fraud, and involuntary manslaughter. 8 years of being told every day that I was a killer, that I had blood on my hands, that I deserved everything that was happening to me. Robert felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction that she had faced consequences for her actions. Sympathy for the woman who had been abandoned by the man she had chosen over him. And something else, something he couldn't quite identify. When I got out, Helena continued, I had nothing. No money, no friends, no family who would speak to me. I had a criminal record that made it impossible to find work. I had been disbarred from ever working in construction or real estate. I was radioactive. So you ended up on the streets. Not immediately. I tried to rebuild. I took whatever jobs I could find, but employers would do background checks and fire me as soon as they discovered my history. I couldn't get approved for an apartment, couldn't get a loan, couldn't even get a credit card. I was trapped in a cycle of poverty and desperation that I couldn't escape. Helena looked directly at Robert, her eyes pleading for understanding. I know what I did to you was unforgivable. I know I destroyed your life, your dreams, your trust. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But Robert, I have changed. Prison changes you. Losing everything changes you. I am not the same person who hurt you 15 years ago. Robert studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, but all he saw was genuine remorse and desperation. This was not the confident, calculating woman who had testified against him in divorce court. This was someone who had been broken and rebuilt, just as he had been. What do you want from me, Helena? He asked quietly. I don't know, she admitted. I never thought I would see you again. I never thought I would have the chance to apologize, to tell you how sorry I am for what I did. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect help. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong, and I have paid for it. Robert was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. The woman who had destroyed his life had been destroyed in return. The man she had chosen over him had betrayed her just as she had betrayed Robert. It was poetic justice, karma coming full circle. But as he looked at her, standing there in her dirty clothes with her hollow cheeks and desperate eyes, Robert felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not revenge, but something else entirely. Opportunity. Helena, he said slowly, I want to make you an offer. She looked up at him with surprise and hope, like a drowning person who had just spotted a life preserver. I'm listening, she said. Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. But it wasn't his usual card, the one with the gold embossing and the Fifth Avenue address. This was a simple white card with just an address and a phone number. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., I want you to go to this address, he said, handing her the card. If you want a real chance at redemption, if you want to prove that you've really changed, if you want to earn a second chance at life, you'll be there. Helena took the card with trembling hands, staring at it as if it might disappear. What is this place? It's a test, Robert said simply. A chance to prove that you're not the same person who destroyed my life. But Helena, understand this. If you take this chance, there's no going back. You'll have to face things about yourself that you might not want to face. You'll have to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. And you'll have to trust me, even though I have every reason to hate you. And if I don't show up, Robert's smile was cold and final. Then you'll never see me again, and you'll continue living exactly the life you've earned. Helena clutched the card to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. Robert, I don't understand. Why would you help me? After everything I did to you, why would you give me a chance? Robert walked back to his car, then paused with his hand on the door handle. Because, Helena, I learned something in the 15 years since you left me. I learned that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful that their destruction becomes irrelevant. But sometimes, just sometimes, you get the chance to do something even better. What's that? You get the chance to prove that you're the bigger person, that you can rise above what was done to you and become something better. Robert got into his car and rolled down the window. 8 a.m., Helena, don't be late. As he drove away, Helena stood on the corner holding the card, watching the Bentley disappear into traffic. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. But as she looked at the address on the card, she realized she had no idea what she was walking into. Robert Spencer was not the man she had left behind. He was someone new, someone powerful, someone who had every reason to want her to suffer. Was this really a chance at redemption? Or was it an elaborate trap designed to give him the revenge he had been denied for 15 years? There was only one way to find out. The next morning, Helena stood outside the address on the card, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The building was not what she had expected. It wasn't a gleaming office tower or a luxury development. It was a rundown community center in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. The paint was peeling, the windows were barred, and the surrounding streets were littered with the debris of urban decay. This was not the world of success and wealth that Robert now inhabited. This was somewhere else entirely. Helena checked the address on the card again, certain she had made a mistake. But the numbers matched. This was where Robert Spencer, Millionaire CEO, had told her to come. She climbed the steps to the front door, her hands shaking as she reached for the handle. Whatever was waiting for her inside, whatever test Robert had devised, she was about to find out. The door opened before she could knock, and Robert stood there, but he looked different again. Gone was the expensive suit and the platinum watch. Instead, he wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, clothes that were nice but not ostentatious. "You came," he said, and she couldn't tell if he was surprised or impressed. "I said I would," Helena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, you did. But people say a lot of things, Helena. What matters is what they do." Robert stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. The interior of the building was cleaner than the exterior suggested, but it was clearly a place that served people who had nothing. Folding chairs were arranged in circles, bulletin boards were covered with notices about job training and addiction recovery, and the air smelled of industrial disinfectant and desperation. "What is this place?" Helena asked. "This is where I started over," Robert said simply. "After you and David destroyed my life, after I lost everything and everyone thought I was finished, I came here. I volunteered, I helped people who had even less than I did, and I learned what it really meant to build something from nothing." Helena looked around the room, trying to understand. "You volunteered here?" "For 3 years. Every evening after my construction jobs, every weekend, every holiday. I served meals to the homeless. I helped people fill out job applications. I listened to stories of addiction and abuse and desperation. I learned more about human nature in this building than I ever learned in architecture school." Robert walked to a bulletin board covered with photos of people who had been helped by the center. Men and women who had overcome addiction, found jobs, reunited with their families, started new lives. These people taught me something important, he said, pointing to the photos. They taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, that people can change, can grow, can become better than they were. But they also taught me that second chances have to be earned. Helena was beginning to understand. And you want me to earn mine. I want you to prove that you've changed. Not with words, not with promises, but with actions. I want you to show me that the woman who destroyed my life has become someone capable of building instead of destroying. Robert handed her a folder. Inside you'll find information about this center, about the people it serves, and about the work that needs to be done. Your job, if you choose to accept it, is to work here for 30 days. Unpaid. Helping people who have nothing. Helena opened the folder, scanning the pages of information about addiction recovery, job training, and homeless services. What exactly would I be doing? Whatever needs to be done. Serving meals, cleaning bathrooms, helping people fill out paperwork, listening to their stories. The same work I did when I was rebuilding my life. And after 30 days? After 30 days, we'll see what kind of person you've become. We'll see if you're really capable of change, or if you're still the same selfish woman who destroyed everything she touched. Helena looked around the room again, at the folding chairs and the bulletin boards and the evidence of lives being rebuilt one small step at a time. This was not what she had expected when she had hoped for Robert's help. She had imagined a job, money, a chance to get back on her feet in the world she had once known. But this was something else entirely. This was a chance to prove that she was worth saving. If I do this, she said carefully, if I work here for 30 days and prove that I've changed, what happens then? Robert's smile was enigmatic. Then you'll discover that some stories have endings that nobody expects. Helena stood there holding the folder, knowing that this was the most important decision she would make in her entire life. She could walk away, go back to the streets, continue living the life she had earned through her own choices. Or she could take this chance, submit to this test, and find out if she was really capable of becoming someone better. When do I start? She asked. Right now, Robert said. There's a kitchen full of people who need to be fed, and you're about to learn what it really means to serve others. As Helena followed Robert deeper into the building, she had no idea that she was about to discover something that would change everything she thought she knew about justice, redemption, and the man whose life she had destroyed 15 years ago. 20 days had passed since Helena began working at the community center. 20 days of serving meals to people who had nothing, cleaning bathrooms that reeked of desperation, and listening to stories that would have broken the heart of the woman she used to be. But Helena was no longer that woman. She arrived every morning at 7 a.m., an hour before the center opened, to help prepare breakfast for the homeless men and women who lined up outside the doors. She stayed until well past closing, mopping floors and sanitizing surfaces, making sure everything was ready for the next day's wave of human need. The work was harder than anything she had ever done, not just physically, though her hands were now permanently stained and her back ached from bending over industrial sinks. It was emotionally exhausting, confronting the reality of how quickly a life could collapse, how easily someone could lose everything and find themselves with nowhere to go. Robert came by every few days, always unannounced, always watching. He would stand in the doorway observing as Helena helped an elderly man fill out a job application, or comforted a young mother whose children had been taken into foster care. He never spoke to her during these visits, just watched with those calculating eyes that revealed nothing. Helena had begun to wonder if this was all an elaborate form of torture, a way for Robert to watch her suffer while pretending to offer redemption. But she couldn't stop. Something about the work, about the people she was helping, had gotten under her skin in a way she hadn't expected. On day 20, everything changed. Helena was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard a commotion in the main dining area. Voices were raised, someone was shouting, and there was the sound of a chair being knocked over. She rushed out to see what was happening and froze. A man stood in the center of the room, thin and disheveled, his clothes hanging off his skeletal frame like rags on a scarecrow. His hair was long and greasy, his face gaunt and covered with the kind of sores that came from living on the streets. His eyes were wild, darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for an escape. But Helena recognized those eyes. She had looked into them 1,000 times, had seen them filled with confidence and cruelty and calculated charm. Now they were filled with nothing but madness and desperation. David Kramer. The man who had destroyed her life was standing in the community center, looking like he had been chewed up and spit out by the very streets where she had been begging just 3 weeks ago. "I need food," David was saying, his voice hoarse and broken. "I need food and I need it now. I haven't eaten in 3 days." The other clients in the dining room were backing away from him, sensing the volatile energy that radiated from his broken form. Helena stood frozen, her heart pounding, unsure whether to run or scream or collapse. David's eyes swept across the room and landed on her. For a moment, there was no recognition, just the desperate hunger of a man who had nothing left to lose. Then his eyes widened, and a smile spread across his face that was equal parts relief and madness. "Helena," he whispered, taking a step toward her. "Helena Torres. My God, is that really you?" Helena's mouth was dry, her voice caught in her throat. The man who had seduced her, used her, and then abandoned her to face the consequences of his crimes was standing in front of her, looking like a ghost of his former self. "David," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Helena." "Thank God," David said, rushing toward her with the desperate energy of a drowning man reaching for a life preserver. "I've been looking for you everywhere. I need your help. I need money. I need a place to stay. I need—" "Stop," Helena said, holding up her hand. "Just stop." David paused, confusion flickering across his face. This was not the Helena he remembered. The Helena he had left behind was weak, dependent, easily manipulated. This woman standing in front of him had something in her eyes that he didn't recognize. Strength. "What happened to you?" Helena asked, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "What are you doing here?" David's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the successful businessman she had once known. "Everything fell apart, Helena. Everything. After I left the country, I thought I was free. I thought I could start over somewhere else, build something new. But," Helena prompted. "But you can't outrun karma," David said, his voice breaking. "The money I stole, it wasn't clean. It was connected to other criminal enterprises, other people who don't forgive and forget. They found me in Costa Rica, took everything, and made it very clear that I was never to show my face in their territory again." Helena listened, her mind racing. "So you came back. I had nowhere else to go. But when I got back to the States, I discovered that my accounts had been frozen, my assets seized, my identity flagged by every law enforcement agency in the country. I couldn't get a job, couldn't get an apartment, couldn't even get a library card." David's eyes were pleading now, desperate. "I've been living on the streets for 2 years, Helena. 2 years of sleeping in doorways and begging for change and eating out of garbage cans. I've lost everything, just like you did." "Not just like me," Helena said quietly. "I lost everything because of what you did. You lost everything because of what you chose to do." David stared at her, surprise flickering across his face. "Helena, we're in this together. We both made mistakes. We both paid the price. But we can help each other now. We can rebuild, start over, become something better." Helena looked at the man who had once been the center of her world, who had convinced her to betray the only person who had ever truly loved her. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the hunger, the absolute certainty that she would help him because she had always helped him before. And she felt nothing but pity. "No, David," she said calmly. "We're not in this together. We never were." David's expression changed, confusion giving way to anger. "What are you talking about?" "Helena, I know you're angry about what happened, but we don't have a choice. We need each other." "I don't need you," Helena said, her voice growing stronger. "I don't need you. I don't owe you anything, and I'm not going to help you." "But Helena," David said, his voice rising, "I'm starving. I'm homeless. I'm desperate. You can't just abandon me like this." Helena felt a cold rage building in her chest. "Abandon you? The way you abandoned me when the police came? The way you disappeared with millions of dollars while I went to prison for 8 years? The way you left me to face the consequences of your crimes alone?" David's face flushed red. "That's different. I had no choice. If I had stayed, we both would have gone to prison." "We both went to prison anyway," Helena said. "The only difference is that your prison was a beach in Costa Rica, and mine was a federal penitentiary where I was told every day that I was a murderer." The other clients in the dining room had formed a circle around them, watching the confrontation with the fascination of people who had seen every form of human drama play out in their own lives. "Helena," Please, David said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong. I was selfish. I was a coward. But I'm begging you, please help me. I have nowhere else to go. Helena looked at the broken man in front of her, the man who had once been so confident, so sure of his own superiority. She remembered the way he had looked at Robert with contempt, the way he had dismissed her ex-husband as weak and unworthy. She remembered the way he had used her, manipulated her, and ultimately discarded her when she was no longer useful. And she made a decision that surprised even her. Sit down, she said quietly. I'll get you something to eat. David's face flooded with relief. Thank you, Helena. I knew you would understand. I knew you would help me. I'm not helping you, Helena said as she walked toward the kitchen. I'm feeding a hungry person. There's a difference. She returned with a plate of food and a cup of coffee, setting them down in front of David without ceremony. He fell on the meal like a starving animal, consuming everything with desperate hunger. This is good, he said between bites. This is really good. Helena, maybe you could talk to whoever runs this place, see if they have any work. I could help out, earn some money, get back on my feet. Helena sat down across from him, studying his face. The person who runs this place isn't going to hire you, David. Why not? I have experience, I have skills. I know construction, I know business. You also have a criminal record, outstanding warrants, and a history of destroying everything you touch. David's face hardened. So do you? Yes, Helena agreed. So do I. But there's a difference between us, David. I've spent the last 3 weeks learning how to build something instead of destroying it. I've been working here, helping people, trying to become someone better than I was. You're working here? David looked around the room with new eyes, seeing the community center not as a place to get help, but as a place where Helena belonged. Helena, what are you doing in a place like this? This is beneath you. No, David. This is where I belong. This is where I'm learning what it means to serve others instead of serving myself. David finished eating and leaned back in his chair, a familiar calculating look creeping into his eyes. Helena, listen to me. I know you think you've found some kind of redemption here, but this isn't real life. This is just poverty with a noble purpose. You and I, we're meant for bigger things. Are we? Helena asked. Because it seems to me that the bigger things we reached for were built on other people's pain. That's business, Helena. That's how the world works. The strong take from the weak, the smart take from the stupid. That's not evil. That's just reality. Helena stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man she had once thought she loved. Is that what you told yourself when you used my husband's designs to build your empire? That you were just being strong and smart? Robert was weak, David said dismissively. He was a dreamer, not a businessman. He never would have made anything of those designs without us. Without us? Helena's voice was sharp. You mean without you manipulating me into stealing them? I didn't manipulate you, David said, his voice rising. You came to me willingly. You wanted out of that marriage. You wanted something better. You wanted a real man who could give you the life you deserved. Helena felt something snap inside her chest. A real man? David, you seduced me, used me to steal from my husband, abandoned me when things got difficult, and then ran away like a coward when the consequences came due. What part of that makes you a real man? I protected us, David said, his voice defensive. I made the hard choices that you were too weak to make. You protected yourself, Helena said, standing up. You saved yourself and left me to pay the price for your crimes. David stood up too, his face flushed with anger. My crimes? Helena, you were a willing participant in everything we did. You signed the papers, you attended the meetings, you approved the budgets. You were my partner in every decision. I was your dupe, Helena said coldly. I was a naive woman who believed the man she loved when he told her that everything was legal and above board. I trusted you, and you used that trust to turn me into an accessory to your crimes. David's mask was slipping now, revealing the cruel, selfish man underneath. Trust? Helena, you left your husband for me. You betrayed the man who loved you for a chance at a better life. Don't pretend you were some innocent victim. You were a gold digger who got exactly what she deserved. The words hit Helena like a physical blow, but instead of crushing her, they filled her with a cold, clear rage. You're right, she said quietly. I was a gold digger. I was selfish and greedy and willing to hurt someone who loved me for a chance at money and status. I was exactly what you say I was. David smiled triumphantly. Finally, some honesty. But David, Helena continued, her voice steady and strong. The difference between us is that I've changed. I've learned from my mistakes. I've paid for my crimes. And I've become someone better. You're still the same selfish, manipulative coward you always were. David's smile faded. Helena, you're being unreasonable. We both made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can help each other. No, Helena said firmly. We can't. Because helping you would mean becoming the person I used to be, and I'm never going back to that. She turned to walk away, but David grabbed her arm. Helena, you can't just walk away from me. I know things about you, about what we did together. I could make life very difficult for you. Helena looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Are you threatening me, David? I'm reminding you that we're in this together, whether you like it or not. Helena pulled her arm free with a strength that surprised both of them. No, David, we're not in this together. We never were. You used me, betrayed me, and abandoned me. And now you want to do it again. Helena, please, David said, his voice becoming desperate again. I'm begging you. I have nothing left. I'm living on the streets. I'm starving. I'm desperate. You're the only person who can help me. Helena looked at the broken man in front of her, the man who had once seemed so powerful and confident. She felt pity for him, but also something else. Something that felt like closure. I'm not going to help you build another empire on other people's pain, she said quietly. But I'm not going to let you starve either. She walked to the front desk and returned with a piece of paper. This is information about the services we provide here. Job training, addiction counseling, mental health support. If you want help, real help, it's available. But you have to want to change. David looked at the paper like it was contaminated. Helena, I don't need charity. I need real help. I need money. I need connections. I need someone who understands what we used to be. What we used to be was criminals, Helena said simply. And I'm not going back to that life. David stared at her for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions. Disbelief, anger, desperation, and finally, a cold hatred that she remembered from their last days together. You think you're better than me now? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. You think working in this dump makes you some kind of saint? No, Helena said calmly. I think it makes me someone who's trying to become better than I was. That's all any of us can do. David crumpled the paper and threw it on the floor. You're still the same gold-digging bitch you always were. You just found a different way to use people. Helena felt the words like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am still that person deep down. But at least I'm trying to be something better. You're not even trying. David looked around the room at the other clients, at the bulletin boards covered with success stories, at the evidence of lives being rebuilt. His face was filled with disgust and contempt. This place is pathetic, he said loudly. All of you are pathetic. You're losers and failures, and you'll never be anything more than that. The room fell silent. Every person there had heard those words before, had been told they were worthless and would never amount to anything. But they had also learned that those words had no power unless you gave them power. Helena stood up slowly, her voice carrying across the room. David, you need to leave. I'm not going anywhere, David said, his voice rising. I have just as much right to be here as any of these losers. No, Helena said firmly. You don't. This is a place for people who want to change, who want to become better. You just want to use people and destroy things, just like you always have. David's face was red with rage. You can't throw me out. I'll call the police. I'll tell them you're discriminating against me. Go ahead, Helena said. Call them. I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear from David Kramer, the man who's been evading arrest warrants for 3 years. David's face went pale. You wouldn't. Try me. For a moment, David looked like he might lunge at her. His hands were clenched into fists, his whole body tense with rage and desperation. But then he seemed to deflate, the fight going out of him like air from a punctured balloon. Fine, he said quietly. Fine. I'll leave. But Helena, this isn't over. We have history, you and I. We're connected whether you like it or not. No, David, Helena said, her voice sad but final. We're not connected. We never were. You used me, and I let you use me, but that's not a connection. That's just two broken people destroying each other. David walked to the door, then turned back for one last look. You'll regret this, Helena. When you're still scrubbing floors and serving slop to losers in 5 years, you'll remember this moment and regret it. Maybe, Helena said. but I'll still be able to look at myself in the mirror." David left without another word, and the room slowly returned to normal. The other clients went back to their meals and their conversations, but Helena could feel them watching her, could sense their respect for the way she had handled the confrontation. She sat back down at the table, her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. She had just faced her past, had confronted the man who had destroyed her life, and had chosen to be better than she used to be. For the first time in years, Helena felt truly free. She didn't notice Robert standing in the doorway, watching everything with those calculating eyes. She didn't see the small smile that played at the corners of his mouth, or the way he nodded slightly, as if something he had been waiting for had finally come to pass. But she would discover soon enough that the real test was just beginning. 3 days later, Helena arrived at the community center to find Robert waiting for her in the main dining room. He was dressed in his expensive suit again, the businessman rather than the volunteer, and his expression was unreadable. "Helena," he said as she approached, "we need to talk." "About what?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew. "About David. About what happened here 3 days ago. About what it means for you." Helena sat down across from him, her heart pounding. "Robert, if you're angry about what happened, I understand. But I couldn't help him. I couldn't go back to being the person I used to be." "I'm not angry," Robert said quietly. "I'm impressed." Helena blinked in surprise. "You're impressed? You passed the test, Helena. The real test. Not the 30 days of community service, not the manual labor and the humble pie. The real test was what you would do when faced with the choice between your old life and your new one." Helena stared at him, understanding dawning. "You knew he would come here." "I've been tracking David Kramer for 3 years," Robert said. "I knew he was back in the country, knew he was living on the streets, knew he was desperate. I also knew that eventually he would find his way to you. So this whole thing was a setup? This whole thing was a chance for you to prove that you've really changed. And you did. When faced with the opportunity to help the man who destroyed your life, you chose to maintain your integrity instead of reverting to your old patterns." Helena felt a mixture of admiration and anger. "You manipulated me, just like David did." "No," Robert said firmly. "David manipulated you for his own benefit. I gave you a chance to discover who you really are when the stakes are highest. There's a difference." Helena was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. "So what happens now?" Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Now you get to make another choice." Helena opened the envelope and found a bus ticket to Portland, Oregon, along with a cashier's check for $5,000 and a letter of recommendation. "What is this?" she asked. "It's your freedom," Robert said. "A chance to start over somewhere new, somewhere clean, somewhere you can build a life based on who you've become rather than who you used to be." Helena stared at the ticket and the check, her mind racing. "You want me to leave? I want you to have the chance to become everything you're capable of becoming. And that can't happen here, in this city, surrounded by the ghosts of your past." "What about David?" "David made his choice. He chose to remain the same selfish, manipulative person he's always been. He'll continue to live with the consequences of that choice." Helena looked around the community center, at the place where she had learned to serve others instead of serving herself. "I don't want to run away again." "You're not running away," Robert said. "You're moving forward. There's a difference." Helena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where she had once begged for change. "Robert, why are you doing this? Why are you giving me this chance?" Robert joined her at the window. "Because 15 years ago, you taught me something valuable. You taught me that people are capable of terrible things, that trust can be betrayed, that love can be used as a weapon. Those were hard lessons, but they made me stronger. And now you've taught me something else. You've shown me that people are also capable of change, that redemption is possible, that sometimes the best revenge is helping someone become better than they were." Helena turned to face him, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Robert. I'm so sorry for everything I did to you." "I know you are," Robert said quietly. "And I forgive you." The words hung in the air between them, 15 years of pain and anger and resentment finally coming to an end. "Will I ever see you again?" Helena asked. "I don't know," Robert said honestly. "But I hope that wherever you go, whatever you do, you'll remember that you're capable of being better than you were. And that sometimes, that's enough." Helena picked up the envelope, holding it against her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you," Robert replied. for showing me that forgiveness is possible, even when it seems impossible. 2 days later, Helena Torres boarded a bus to Portland, Oregon, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and a letter of recommendation from Robert Spencer Construction. She had no idea what awaited her in her new city, no guarantee that she would succeed in building a new life. But for the first time in 15 years, she had something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. And in New York, Robert Spencer returned to his empire, his buildings, and his billions, knowing that he had accomplished something more valuable than any financial success. He had proven that even the deepest wounds could heal, that even the greatest betrayals could be forgiven, and that sometimes the most powerful form of revenge was helping your enemy become a better person. As for David Kramer, he continued to wander the streets of New York, a broken man who had refused every opportunity for redemption. He remained on the corner where Robert had first seen Helena, holding a cardboard sign of his own, begging for change that would never come. Because some people choose to change, and some people choose to remain the same. And in the end, that choice makes all the difference.